Newly released poll by CNN of Donald Trump versus Vice President Kamala Harris, going over the results of this poll and kind of going step by step and all the data associated with it. So first things first, the poll mentions that Donald Trump holds 49% support among registered voters nationwide to Kamala Harris's 46%. And that is within the poll's margin of error, sampling error, which is about, I believe, 3%. In fact, if I scroll down, it'll give me the exact result right here. I believe, yes, it is right here. The margin of error is about 3 percentage points. So that is within the poll's margin of error. And what does this mean? Well, the poll actually, the article the CNN put out for the poll does very good detail kind of going over the poll itself. The poll conducted online from July 22nd to July 23rd, which, as I mentioned, had Trump at 49 and Harris had 46, is in stark contrast to a poll back in June where Donald Trump was leading Joe Biden by 6 points in a head-to-head matchup. So Trump now leads Harris by 3 points. Trump led Biden in the prior CNN poll by 6. And Harris, they go into more of the specifics of how the poll breaks down itself into different demographics and political party demographics. Harris wins 95% of those supporters who said they supported Biden, while Trump retains the support of a slightly smaller 92% of his previous backers. Those who previously said they would support neither Biden nor Trump in a two-way matchup now split 30% for Harris and 27% for Trump, while the rest saying they'd vote for someone else or opt out of this year's election. Half of those who back Harris in the new poll, 50%, say their vote is more in support of her than against Trump, and that is a dramatic shift compared with Trump-focused dynamic of the Biden-Trump race, where for Biden voters, only 37% said they were voting for the president. That means 63% of them were going to be voting against the former president, Donald Trump. This time around, it's an even split between supporting Harris and voting against Trump, which that could explain why Harris has been performing better than Biden, as there's more Democratic enthusiasm to vote for her than for Biden, which may be a reason the numbers are getting closer. Not 100% sure that's the reason, but I think it's a very good hypothesis as to why Harris has been performing better than Biden. And they also did this with Trump support, where about 3/4 of Trump supporters, 74%, saying their vote for Trump is rather in support for him than opposition to Harris. So Trump supporters are much more likely to vote for Trump versus against Harris than Harris's voters are to vote for Harris against Trump. That's about 74% compared to 50, so a 24% difference there in the support. And that's an increase in the affirmative support from the June poll of Trump versus Biden, where that 74% number was 6%. So that number went up by 8%, and given all the events that happened with President Trump over a week ago now in Pennsylvania, it certainly seems that at very least that event shored up 8% more of his support that he already had. It shored up people voting for him by a little bit more in the percentage wise. The poll also found that, according to CNN, Trump's approval rating is sitting at 43%, which you may think on the surface sounds bad, and in a position for election it's usually not good, but that's the highest CNN has had in its polling since 2020. So that is both good news for Trump, even though the number may not be great. At least in the CNN poll, that's good news for Trump. The poll also suggests that Trump's support among his strongest groups is holding very steady, even as his Democratic opponent will no longer be Biden, now it is Harris. 67% of white voters without degrees support him over Harris, which is identical almost to what him versus Biden was, which was 66%. He continues to hold support over a majority of men, 53% over Harris. Biden, he had 54, so basically the same. And he maintains the support of about 9 in 10 Republicans and Republican-leaning independents, 90% versus Harris, 89% versus Biden. So again, basically the same. This is why earlier in the video I said, I don't think this poll being 3 points is a situation of Trump support going down and Harris's going up. I think this is Trump support remained pretty much exactly the same. It's that Harris is now consolidating more of the Democratic voters who didn't want to vote for Biden, who weren't sure if he could do the job. They're now coming back to Harris to the Democratic side, but Trump support has not gone down at all. Now it gets into the shift toward affirmative support for Harris, and where that may be happening as well. Among Harris supporters younger than 45, 43% say their vote is more in support of her than Trump, or than against Trump. So that's 57% that would say they're voting against Trump, which is up from 28% of Biden. Again, I can't stress this enough. Harris, I think by not being Biden, has been able to consolidate a lot of Democratic support that might not have voted for Biden on election day. They've now come back to her, which is now why her numbers are going up. It'll be interesting to see over time if these numbers persist, if Harris keeps this support, or once she gets more media scrutiny and such on her, will these numbers kind of come back down closer to where Biden were? That'll be something to watch in the coming days and coming weeks. Among voters of color who back Harris, 57% say their vote is for her compared against Trump, which would be 43% against Trump, and that was 48% among Biden voters in June. So again, more support for Harris and less against Trump than what Biden was performing at, consolidating that Democratic support. 54% of women are backing Harris to support her. That was compared to 43% who are backing Biden. Women voters, especially with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, is going to be a very big demographic to watch in this upcoming election. If Harris loses or wins, I think the woman voter percentage is going to be a big group to watch out for and see how they vote. They also goes into some specifics of different age groups. Voters 18 to 34 versus Harris versus Trump. Harris is leading this group 47 to 43%. So actually, it's a lot closer than I thought, because a lot of the younger voters for past few elections have been trending towards the Democratic side, but it's still a very close number. But when you look back in April and June, Trump was leading Biden in this field 49 to 42. So Trump support here has actually gone down. If this is going to be the final result, Trump support has gone down by 6% with young voters. And Harris has gone up from Biden's 42 to 47, so she's gone up by 5. So except for 1% of the votes, almost an exact flip. Among black voters, Biden led Trump 70 to 23. Harris now leads Trump 78 to 15. So Trump is still actually doing pretty decent with black voters compared to other past Republicans, and even him in 2016 or in 2020. But the numbers that Trump was showing of him doing very well with black voters, at very least, Harris in this poll has made those numbers come back down to what they maybe more traditionally be with Democratic voters. And with female voters, as I mentioned earlier, Biden versus Trump back in April and June, it was an exact tie, 46-46. Now Harris versus Trump, 50-45. The gender gap situation with the polls now sees Harris being on top of the ticket. Definitely more women's support for her than for Biden. So that's kind of, I think, where some of the Harris support has been consolidating from. Younger voters going more towards Harris than Biden, and women voters especially now going for Harris than Biden. Black support as well. Definitely 8% went down for Trump. Harris gained 8% here. That explains where the margin went. So I kind of just went over all of that. And when you look at it, that's really the biggest, I think, takeaways of this poll. There's other statistics and details to go into if you want to look at it more, but for the poll, that's the main part that I wanted to go over. So now we just look at really quick at the RCP average of polls between Trump versus Harris. Trump is sitting at 47.6%, Harris at 45.9%. That's a 1.7% average lead for Trump. In my last video, I went over the Trump versus Biden one before Biden dropped out of the race. Trump was leading Biden by 3.1%. Harris is down to 1.7% lead for Trump. So Harris has definitely consolidated more of the Democratic support, and she's definitely seeing a polling bump right now. The question is, as we get closer to the election, media coverage attention is going to pick up for Trump and Harris. And the question will be, does Harris continue to see this polling bump? Does it continue? Does it stay steady? Does she stay where she is now? Does she maybe go down? Does a Trump versus Harris debate affect these numbers? These are the questions we're going to have to be asking as things get closer to the election. But as you can see at the top of the list, this CNN poll at the time I'm recording this, Trump 49, Harris 46. It's interesting to watch. If we don't know obviously how the popular vote's going to go or what the national vote is going to be like, but if Trump remains at 49% in an overall national vote environment, that's very good news for him, because usually the Republicans are at a disadvantage at winning the national vote. That's just how it is. There's so many Democrats living in bigger states and cities among the country. Typically, I would say the Democrats favor to win the popular vote. But Since the announcement that Biden's dropping out and Harris is to be the nominee, there's been, let's count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 polls have come out. 5 out of the 7 has Trump beating Harris. 1 has the race as a tie. Only 1 has Harris leading, and that was by 2 points within the margin of error. So what the biggest takeaway here is that this is going to be a very close race between Trump and Harris, but at least right now, Trump leading over Biden has carried over to Trump still leading over Harris, but by a smaller margin. But it's not fair to say that Trump is at very least still in the lead right now. It's a narrower lead than it was Trump versus Biden. The race is much closer now, but Trump is at very least still leading Harris. And I look at the polls, like the Morning Consult poll and the CNN poll, 4,000 registered voters, a very big sample size. Trump is up 2. Generally speaking, the bigger the sample size, the more I tend to believe in a poll, because I think you're getting a bigger representation of the population. Forbes Harris X, same thing, 53-47 more people. I definitely trust that more. CBS, 2,200 or so voters, 51-48 for Trump. The ones with the bigger sample size seem to have a bigger margin of victory for Trump. But 3 points is mostly what the average has been for the last day or two. The Forbes poll was the only one that was above that at 6 points. And then this Emerson poll down here, which is 6 points, it goes back to July 7th. So definitely a ways back now. It's definitely gotten closer at the national level for Trump versus Harris. But as usual, as I have to mention, we don't elect our presidents in the United States by national popular vote. We go state by state. We go, and very importantly, the swing states. And as we look at the new polls today, there has been a new poll out of Pennsylvania. It's by a polling group called American Greatness and NSOR. I'm not super familiar with them, but I'll be doing more information and research on them in the future. But in this poll, Trump has 47%, Harris has 45%. I'm sure that's within the poll's margin of error. So as I mentioned last video, we're still waiting on a lot more information out of the swing states of how Harris being in the race maybe changes things, maybe doesn't change things, and that's something definitely to watch. In yesterday's video, I may have mentioned very briefly, there's a poll out of Georgia that was a very close race as well. But in both of these polls, even though they were very close, it was Trump +1 and Trump +2. And as I've done in the past few videos now, Trump, I believe, starts out at 235 electoral votes. Harris starts out at 226. If Donald Trump were to win Georgia by that 1% margin and win Pennsylvania by that 2% margin, that would get Trump to 270 electoral votes if he wins every other state he won in the 2020 election against Biden, which, barring some catastrophic collapse from Trump on election day, he should win every single state he won back in 2020. Seeing as Biden was performing and polling much better than Harris is right now in 2024 as he did in 2020, or way better than Biden was polling wise in 2020 than he was in 2024. So Trump should win every single state he won last time. The question is, how many swing states does Trump win versus Harris, and does he potentially win the election by winning enough of them? If those two polls are accurate and Trump wins Georgia and Pennsylvania, Trump wins. Trump gets 270. He gets the exact number of electoral votes he needs to win a majority of the electoral votes. Trump would win. If any of these is wrong, and say Pennsylvania goes to Harris, but Trump can still win Georgia, well, at very least, neither one of their pathways to victory is gone yet. Because Trump can then win the state of Michigan, that would get him to 266, and then one more of the remaining swing states would get Trump to 270. Let's say Trump could win the state of Nevada. He's been polling very well there in the last few days prior to Harris joining the race. That would get Trump to 272. Trump would win the electoral map. Harris, of the 3 Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, historically, Michigan has been the most Democratic of the 3. So if Pennsylvania is going blue, there may be a good chance Michigan is also going blue. That would put Harris at 260. But again, Trump's pathway to victory is not yet gone. By winning the state of Arizona, that puts Trump at 268. Harris is 260. Whoever wins Wisconsin wins the presidential election. Trump wins it. Trump wins the state of Wisconsin and wins the election. Harris wins the state of Wisconsin. She wins the presidential election by 2 electoral votes. Definitely one of the most contested elections of all time. So it's really hard to imagine a pathway for victory for Trump without winning one of the Rust Belt states. For Harris, it's actually pretty simple. For her to win, she's got to win all 3. Harris, I don't think, can win the presidential election without winning all 3 of the Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Harris may be able to win Arizona and get to 11, and then Trump can win Wisconsin. And this scenario is technically possible where Harris can win, but by Harris winning all three of these Rust Belt states, it essentially cuts off Trump's pathway to victory. Because for this to happen, for Trump to make up for this, he has to win all of these states and then flip a state like New Hampshire and get the 4 electoral votes there to win. But New Hampshire is likely going to vote more Democratic than Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin. 3 states Trump won in 2016 and were very close in 2020. New Hampshire was not very close in 2020, and 2016 seems like a long time ago now, even though the polling has been close. So I don't really know if Harris is going to lose New Hampshire on the same night she's winning three states. So I can't stress this enough. The polls coming out in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, as well as Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, are going to be absolutely crucial to see where this race stands right now, because that's where the election will be won. I think it'll be run in the Rust Belt. If Harris loses one of these 3 states, Trump is in play and in a pretty good position to win. If she wins all 3, Trump has pretty much no chance of winning the presidential election. I can't stress enough how important these 3 states are. So that'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you always get notified when I make new videos in the future just like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in a future video.